Times. Gary, thanks for being here in the summertime.
Oh, Cy, it's something. It's different. You think we can handle it? It's not Lent,
I know it's
so
weird. I feel out of place. I feel like you're
I
like
know.
you're our Christmas and Easter guest. like
That's true. Oh man,
like well, that's all right. Most Catholics go to church Christmas and Easter too, so we're glad that you're here. Um,
thank you.
you also do a lot of public speaking. You can find out all about what Gary does, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we go, followingthetruth.com. But when your days are dark, God is still good. What does that mean? What are you trying to say there?
Cy, this book grew out of St. Paul's famous Bible verse. I use it all the time. We see it all over the place. Romans 8:28, when Paul wrote, "We know in everything God works for good, for those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose." Paul said, "We know that. We know that God works for good in everything." And when I read that, I say, "We do." Paul might know it, right?
That's the Gary
So
Zimack response. We
yeah,
do?
right. We do. But here's the thing: when you look at Paul's life, what he went through, the suffering, the difficulties he faced, if he's able to say that I know that no matter what I go through, God can bring good out of it, I want to listen to what this guy has to say. So this book grew out of that. This book is an attempt to give hope to somebody who is hopeless. I don't try to answer the why question because sometimes, most of the time, I don't know why you might be going through what you're going through. So, what I did in this book, I went into the Bible and I really felt I was led by the Holy Spirit to do this. And I look at 14 biblical accounts of God working good in really ugly situation. And the hope is that if somebody can see him working good in these horrific, oftentimes, situations, they can believe that he can do it in their situation too. That's what the book's all about.
If you want to talk about that, give us a call, 888-318-7884. These are dark days for a lot of people. It hasn't felt light and breezy for years. I mean, certainly the pandemic got us all down, but
Yeah.
it just seems like it's gone on longer than that. People seem down in many ways.
Yeah, and Cy, the reason I'm so passionate about this, and I've been doing full-time evangelization, writing, speaking for 11 years now. The reason I'm so passionate is I'm one of those people. I tend to be anxious. I tend to be negative. I tend to get discouraged.
Hmm.
But the Lord has helped me so much. And, I keep meeting people. I meet so many people who say, "Gary, that's my story. Your story is my story. And you've
Yeah.
given me hope." And so I just keep trying to do that to let people know that, man, God is still good and he can bring you peace even in the midst of whatever is going on. And no doubt about it, my friend, there's a lot of bad stuff going on right now,
Yeah, yeah. So,
right?
so uh, I'm interested in your strategy, though, of not trying to answer the why question, because I
Yeah,
think that's the most pressing question when we're really suffering. But it
right.
feels like the most pressing question, but we don't actually need the answer to it.
No, and what I wanted to do, Si, I didn't want to be the guy to try to answer the why question for somebody who is in the middle of some horrific suffering.
Yeah,
They might tackle that question themselves, and the Lord might inspire them. But I don't want to look at somebody and say, "Well, here's why," or "Here's what you need to do."
yeah.
That would be really insensitive of me, and I didn't try to do that. But I felt the Holy Spirit could guide me to do that through the inspired words in the Bible. Because people, they're looking for hope more than anything else. They're looking for hope and comfort. And sometimes we can do that without getting the why question answered. A lot of times we can do that without getting the why question answered.
Well, if I'm really convinced, and I have found this in my own life, and I think many Christians would confess to the same thing. When we become really convinced that God is on our side, is not our opponent, is not our, kind of executioner, or is not a puppet master, but is truly on
Yeah.
our side. Once we become aware, then there is a kind of if you want to tell me why now, fine, but I can wait for the why as well. That trust breeds a letting go of the need for the answer.
That is exactly right. And I sometimes make the point when I know my wife loves me. I have no doubt about it. Therefore, when she makes dinner for me, I don't test it to see if I'm being poisoned because I trust her. I know she loves me, right?
Yeah.
And that's right. And that's right. That's what the kind of relationship we need to work on with God. And it's a gradual process. I'll tell you, Si, I trust him more now. I choose to trust him more now than I did 5, 6, 7 years ago. The more I know him, the more I realize the more I realize he is on my side. He loves me, and he's bigger than whatever I'm facing. He could make it go away, but if he allows it to exist, it must somehow be good for me. I really believe that.
Yeah,
And
me
I
too.
believe it more each day.
888-318-7884 is the number. Gary Zimak is our guest. You know him from Give Up Worry for Lent, for that book or other books in that genre. This book, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good. And you said the more I know him, and by the way, I'm hoping that my marriage will progress to the point where I don't test my food for poison. I am. It's a beautiful testament to your marriage, Gary.
Well, thank you.
But you said the more I know him, the more I trust.
Yeah.
But the Word of God is a great place to start getting to know him.
It sure is. It sure is. And I was very guilty of not understanding the Bible. I didn't know anything about the Bible despite 12 years of Catholic education. But the Lord has gradually brought me along. And I give a lot of credit to the Holy Spirit, too. The Holy Spirit helps me, works through me to help every day. One of my prayers, my wife and I pray together in the morning. One of our prayers is always, Holy Spirit, come alive in me, inspire my thoughts, my words, and my actions. And I always add, please make the Father and Jesus more real to me today, and help me not forget about them.
Yeah.
And I find it working. And I really look at God as my Father now, and so does my wife. She looks at him as her Father, which is something that grew out of COVID for her. When we went through the pandemic, she struggled tremendously with anxiety. We talked about this before, but through our praying together, and she began to reach out to God as her Father, and we talk to him as our Father. We call him by name, Father. Every morning we talk to him. That really helps. But, it takes time, and it's a gradual getting to know you process, but it's great because I'm very peaceful for the most part now.
Oh, gosh, what a beautiful witness. Hey, if you're afflicted with anxiety and upset and worry, Gary Zimak's the guy you want to know. He's here with us for this hour. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. We'll continue our conversation about the new book, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good. And we'll get your calls for Gary right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Check out EWTN's official YouTube channel.
Just follow the link on our homepage at EWTN.com or go to YouTube.com/EWTN.
Watch EWTN's live shows or today's homily from the Daily Mass.
Click the upload button to see our most recent clips.
You can also find all of EWTN YouTube content by clicking the playlist button.
It's all on the official EWTN YouTube channel at YouTube.com/EWTN.
Visit today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Gary Zimak, our guest. It's been a tradition now. We usually start Lent or prepare for Lent with an interview with Gary because of his very, very fine, very accessible and helpful book, really accessible to anybody, called Give Up Worry for Lent. And it's a 40-day kind of process of walking with Jesus to give up that worry. He's got a new book out called When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good. And if you'd like to talk with Gary, just give us a call, 888-318-7884. So what you do here in this new book, Gary, is you take actual Bible stories where things looked pretty dark, and God expressed his goodness in there. And I don't know if you're some kind of Bible genius or super Bible scholar, but you started with the story of Adam and Eve. What would make you start with the story of Adam and Eve?
By the way, let me just say
we went in
this. Let me just say
chronological
that.
order.
When you said, I don't know if you're a Bible scholar, the answer is absolutely not. But here's the thing. I believe the Lord speaks to us on our level, and I've learned a lot about the Bible in the past several years, and he really does speak to us through the Bible, and I love to let him speak through me through Scripture. So Adam and Eve, here's the deal, Si. So many times in my life, I have messed up. I said the wrong thing. I shut off my mouth. I sent a bad email. I made a bad comment on Facebook. On and on and on. And I knew that from that point on, the situation was damaged forever. It was unfixable. My life was over, and I was plunged into despair. And then we look at Adam and Eve. When it comes to bad mistakes, you're not going to top them. And if God can bring good out of that, he can bring good out of anything that I do. Si, I'm not that good that I can screw up so bad that God can't fix it.
Wow,
And
what a
that's why I
way to
use the
say it.
story.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny because you can get into, I mean, there's probably endless theology that can be done about Adam and Eve. But here's a very basic, clear lesson. And I love the fact that there is nothing I can do that's a bigger mess up than what Adam and Eve did. And right away, God started to work on fixing it. That's his approach, is a fatherly, well, let's see if we can get this back together.
Yeah. Now, in all fairness, it took him a long time because he's very methodical. And also, there were permanent consequences from what Adam and Eve did. He didn't make it go away. He brought good out of it. And I think that's what we need to look at. First of all, we got to be patient with God. He can bring good out of our mess up. He's going to depend on us to cooperate, possibly. And we might never see the good that he brings out of it. Sometimes, Si, you know what? I've been in that situation where I think I've mastered a particular sin. Oh, I'm never going to do this anymore. I remember when I used to do that. And guess what happens? I fall on my face. And I think the good that comes out of that sometimes is the Lord saying, Gary, you got to get a little more humble. You're getting a little too proud. You're forgetting you need me. And the good that can come out of your mess up is sometimes the realization of just how weak you are and how much you need the Lord's help and what a great sacrament confession is.
Yeah. And there he is, just like he was for Adam and Eve, to bring you back. And so this is what you do in the book. Like, when we mess up is the chapter on Adam and Eve. Followed by a chapter on Lazarus when God is late, or a wonderful chapter on Joseph when others mess up, because that can be...
That's even worse, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, I didn't even cause this and I'm paying the price.
Exactly. But there's God in a fatherly way to bring good out of it. I think one of the things that I don't know if it's... I do think it's worse for modern people than for any other people is this idea of getting dreams dashed. Like in the olden days when you were like, you just, I don't know, inherited the farm or something, then you just, maybe you had a bad year or there were locusts that year or something like that, but you knew what you were going to do. Now we kind of get lost and get our dreams dashed. I think there's more disappointment. There's also many more goods, but there's more disappointment. And you take the disciples on the road to Emmaus to help with that emotion.
I think it's a great story because we're sort of walking along with them, eavesdropping, if you want to say that. They're depressed. They're discouraged. They're thinking, oh, man, they just killed our Messiah. What do we do now? And Jesus walks along with them, which I just love how he plays along. Oh, what are you guys talking about? And they tell him. And I think that's so great that the Lord asked that question. Of course, he knew what they were talking about, but by him asking that and it being recorded in the Bible, now I get an insight into their mindset. They're depressed. They're discouraged because he was crucified and he's alive and walking with them.
Right.
And so when we look at that story, that's a reminder that just as Mary Magdalene came to anoint a dead body and was crying because they took him out of the tomb, sometimes we are looking at a very good situation in our lives, a good outcome, but we're not perceiving it that way. It's possible we're getting it wrong, which is what happened with the disciples on the road to Emmaus because it didn't play out the way they expected.
Right, not at all the way they expected, but it's so. There's another one where I just get a sense of confidence when you point out the fact that in their dejection, he was already there with them. They just didn't know. yet.
Exactly.
They didn't
He
know.
he came to them. They were suffering. He came to them. And I think we see that so many times with the Lord. When people are hurting, he has compassion on them. His heart's breaking. And he doesn't just sit back and say, wow, that's a shame. He does something about it. So if we're hurting right now, if we're struggling, if our dreams have collapsed, he's right on the job. We just got to reach out to him and access him, because he's there feeling bad for us, but also showing his mercy and helping us.
Yeah. When your days are dark, God is still good is the new book from Gary Zimak. That's what we're talking about. You are welcome to call. There are folks on the line. I'm going to ask Gary about one or two more Bible stories, and then I'll get to the calls. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Is that all right if I ask you about a couple more of these Bible stories?
Please do.
Because it's just... you know what? It's through the book, you've read these stories through the lens of what you do, which is to help people let go of the worry and upset by a very simple act, which is also the hardest act maybe you'll ever perform. Trust God.
And that's a conscious decision. It's not a feeling, and I say that all the time. Somebody will say, and I think you can see it over my shoulder, the Divine Mercy image, very important to me, Jesus, with the words, Jesus, I trust in you. I'll tell people to pray that prayer. Well, I don't feel it. I feel like a hypocrite. You don't have to feel it, because it's a choice. It's not a feeling. So trust. You can choose to trust the Lord even if you are scared to death. I do it all the time. Even if you feel hopeless, good. That's even a bigger act of trust, right? And that makes him feel good. We have to remember, Jesus has human emotions. He can feel it. He can feel things. He can feel your love. So when I'm scared, when I think this situation is fixed beyond belief, and I turn to him and say, Jesus, I trust in you, he thinks, oh, man, this guy really loves me.
Which I know in your case is true, Gary. 888-318-7884, the number. Okay, here, there's a lot of people, and I may be among them, who will go with you all the way down this road, but we have a problem when it comes to money. Can I really trust God with my finances? That's his area, Lord. I will take care of myself. I don't want to let you in there. And you have a chapter called When You're Struggling Financially, and weirdly, you went to the prophet Elijah.
I did. He's always been one of my favorites. So 11 years in full time. This is my full-time job, supporting my family as a Catholic evangelist and author. This is how I earn my living. Sigh. That makes no sense, right? I was in software for 30 years, but I have seen the Lord provide in an incredible way for us. Did we have to downsize? Oh, you better believe we did. We had to sell our house. We had to sacrifice. We had to give up some of our whims, and we weren't living extravagantly, but I have seen the Lord provide, and I continue to see the Lord provide. And I look at that story of Elijah, the prophet, where he's being fed. The Lord sends him away to a brook where he's getting his drinking water, and then the ravens are providing his food to him. The ravens are scavengers. Why would they share their food? That makes no sense. And then the brook dries up. I love this part. The brook dries up, and then the Lord says, all right, now I need you to go to this place called Zarephath, and there's a widow there, a helpless widow who is going to provide for you. What makes sense about that? This is right, but it worked. And that's why the Lord calls us to trust. I don't like it, Si. I'm a control freak. I like to be self-sufficient. But he's working on me. And he is so faithful. That's why that story means a lot to me. And I'll tell you what, he is there is no way, I could say this without doubt, there is no way the Lord would create us and then abandon us. He's going to provide for our needs. The fact that you and I are alive right now is proof of that. He's taking care of all of our needs. Not always our wants, but our needs.
Gary Zimak, our guest. The lines are getting quite full, Gary. So before I will get to ask you about the big one, the big J, Job.
Oh, yeah.
Who's got to be, we can't get through this conversation without Job. But let's go to Patricia in St. Louis, Missouri, who's been waiting. Patricia listening on Covenant Network. Thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
Hi, I don't really have a question. I'm a little bit older lady, and I'm retired. And some of the younger women know that they can come up to me, and I have an ear. And I find the best thing when they tell me their woes and their children are such awful things, and I'm thinking of my brothers, and I don't tell them about that. I just say, you know what? Remember on the road to Emmaus? Jesus was there, and they didn't even know him. Well, Jesus is in the midst of your trials right now. He knows what's going on, and he wants to talk to you. And if you just talk to him, you'll be able to fill it out. Or you'll have people around you you can tell, you can kind of get some advice from them. Because it's going to work out. You cannot be discouraged. He's the one that made you, and he's the one that will stay with you. And it makes me feel better. I'm not just saying, oh, well, I'll pray for you, which is what my usual comment has been. I go, that's pretty routine. You've got to give them something else. You've got to give them Jesus. And these are Catholics. They go to the Latin Mass. But they have problems and they have complaints too, just like I do.
Gary?
So thank you.
Oh, sorry. Patricia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. But Gary, go ahead and respond.
Yeah, Patricia, great point you make. And one of the things I love your approach. People need to believe that Jesus cares and he is with them. Emmaus is a great story. One of my favorite little couple words in the story of Lazarus, the death of Lazarus, is the fact that Jesus wept, that Bible verse, Jesus wept. And he didn't weep because he didn't know what he was going to do. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He wept when he saw the people's sadness. That's what the Bible says. And that's what so many times we see Jesus had pity on the people. We see that throughout the Gospels. He cares. He cares. If you're crying, he is crying with you. And just the fact that he doesn't take the problem away, it doesn't mean that he can't. It means that he's doing it in his time. That's such an important concept to remember, that the Lord is with us and we never have to go through anything alone.
Patricia, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the call. The number here is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. The new book from Gary Zimak, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good. And it's following in a long line of work that Gary has done to help us, which I think, Gary, one of the reasons I love having you on, I got to say, is that in a practical sense, I don't think that there's a more pervasive problem than the lack of peace that people have in the modern world. This sense of worry and anxiety and upset.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough things to worry about, all you need to do is turn the TV on, go on the internet, and you'll be given a list. But Cy, we are given a half truth. We're told all the things that are a danger to us. The media often likes to say that, well, this is bad, this is going to happen. But they don't give you the truth. The truth is that the Lord's bigger than any of those problems and that he is in control. So yeah, as Jesus said, was John 16:33, in this world you will have problems, but be of good cheer. Not because they're all going to go away, but because I have overcome the world. And Cy, just quickly, when I go and I give my parish missions, especially the Lenten ones, when I get to speak sometimes at the end of the Masses briefly, I'll always make the point, why we worry as Christians? It's because God isn't real enough to us. If he was real enough to us and we knew how much he loved us and we knew how much in control he really was, we wouldn't worry. But that's the thing. And this is a process. I am an anxious person by nature. I am a control freak. And he's gradually helping me to overcome that, because you can't be a follower of the Lord and try to lead him at the same time. It doesn't work out that way, right? I'm learning that.
I should give, I didn't mention your podcast. Following the Truth is the podcast. You can go to followingthetruth.com to find out about everything that Gary does, including all the books, the devotionals, all the wonderful stuff, including the new book, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good. But he does these parish missions to help people give up worry for Lent. You can get them for Advent. Yeah, because I know parishes do parish missions at Advent. You can have them come out at Lent. I highly recommend it. And you know what? You'll be addressing what people really are suffering with, this worry. Followingthetruth.com. We'll continue with more Gary Zimak on Catholic Answers Live right after this. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Here's a little fact for you, a little fact you can file away. It's a fact. When your days are dark, God is still good. That's also the title of Gary Zimak's newest book. You know Gary from his very popular work, Give Up Worry for Lent. Thousands and thousands of people have done as their Lenten devotional. And this one just out from, tell me the publisher's Ave Maria?
Ave Maria Press.
Ave Maria Press. I still haven't asked you about Job, and I'm going to, but I feel like I've been depriving the folks on the phone, so we're going back to the phones. All right, Gary?
You got it.
All right, back we go. Let's see who we got. We got Greg in Cleveland, Ohio, listening on AM 1260, The Rock. Greg, you are very welcome here. Go ahead with your question for Gary. Did I get the right line? Greg? All right, we're going to have to come back to Greg. I don't know. I was on the right line, right? Line 4. It says 4. I push 4. Okay. I don't know if you know this, Gary, but there's we have a technical problem in this studio a lot, which is it says line 4 and I push line 5. It says line 3 and I push line 2. But I didn't do it that time. But that is a regularly occurring technical problem.
I believe you, Si. You have an honest face. I believe you, brother.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Gary. The number is 888-318-7884. We'll come back to that call. So now that gives me a chance to ask you about Job. What if I read your book and I get to the end and I'm like, Gary, I just don't understand it. I'm sorry. I don't understand any of this stuff. It's just over my head.
Or I don't believe it. Right, Si? I mean, and when I wrote this book for people who are really suffering. I have no idea what somebody could be going through who was reading this book. And, when I had the initial conversation with my editor, she was saying that whatever you do, don't start with Job because everybody's going to expect you to start with Job. And I said, fair enough. I won't use Job. I was praying about it and the story of Job just came into my mind. And I thought, Job is like the catch-all. For 38 chapters, Job talked questions. He talked to his friends. He talked to the Lord. God did not say a word to Job. He didn't explain anything. And then God decided to talk. And he talked, and he talked, and he talked. And he asked Job a series of questions. He didn't answer any of Job's why questions. And basically what the Lord said to Job was, Job, where were you when I created the world? Who's God, Job? And Job finally understood that, and he said, yeah, wait a minute. He's God. I can't possibly figure out everything about God. And that was good enough for Job. And Si, I wanted to end with that catch-all of Job for somebody who says, I still can't get it. I still don't see it. But we have this story of Job who trusted, who believed that God knew best. And ultimately, that gave him peace, and his fortune turned around. Kind of a happy ending for Job. But I think the Lord needed to teach Job that lesson. It's a lesson that I have to learn.
Right.
If I could figure God out, he wouldn't be God. And there's a certain peace in just saying, Father, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to trust you because I don't have to worry about the details. It's in your hands. So that's why I ended with Job.
Well done. I'm glad you did include him. That's a story. That's the most extraordinary story. Coming from the ancient world, this story of Job, and God's extraordinary answer to him. One that really doesn't satisfy. A lot of people are not satisfied with that answer and don't understand why Job is satisfied. But once you get why Job is satisfied with the answer, then you get it.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing, Cy, is Job never stopped talking to God. Mm-hmm. He had all these people. Mrs. Job was great, wasn't she? Why don't you just curse God and die? I mean, well, talk about a supportive wife.
Thanks, Mrs. Job.
Yeah, exactly. But Job never stopped talking to the Lord. And that's what I would say to anybody who is struggling. Let the Lord know. Let him know you're not happy with him. Let him know you don't understand. Let him know you're miserable. Let him know you're mad at him. I've yelled at him. Yeah. As a good priest friend of mine once said, he's got big shoulders. He can handle it.
Amen, brother. We're going to Susan in Illinois. Susan, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Gary Zimak.
And it's 95.9 is the station.
Oh, okay. Listening on 95.9 FM in Illinois.
AM.
AM. Yes. No, 95.9 can't be. Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that.
I don't know how. Maybe it's a God thing, but I really enjoy listening. Everything you just said about having peace when we have 3 girls, all 3 of them have anxiety, but they were raised in a Christian home and they don't believe anymore. And even our youngest daughter, she's 24 and we're moving her to Chicago. We're meeting her there. And anyway, we have a U-Haul and I'm following my husband, but everything y'all have just said just reaffirms that we just need to keep praying for them. And I like what you said about talking to God more about how you feel about it, because our youngest even said she doesn't like guys anymore and she likes girls. And I don't believe she was born that way, but we just keep loving her and trying to look at her through the eyes of God. And
I'm glad you called, Susan, because I have to say one of the most common things that folks struggle with and worry about is the state of their children's relationship with God. Gary?
Cy, that is such a real problem. Susan, I am glad you called too, and it sounds like you have the perfect approach to this. And as somebody who likes to control, one of the things I have to ask myself if I'm worried about my kids or the state of the world or anything else is, what can I do about it? And one thing I can always do, as you said, is pray about it. And then if I can't do anything else, it's time to just trust that God will work, knowing that he loves your children even more than you do. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. And really, you do what you can, do your best, and let God do the rest. That's one of the easiest ways to find peace in life. And then, you read stories in the Bible. That's why I love some of these stories in the Bible. When we look at the miracles of Jesus, the hopeless situations, the healings, the miracles, we're reminded that nothing's impossible for God. Just because he's not answering as quickly as we would like doesn't mean he can't do it. It means he's got another plan. So yes, pray and then give it up to him and surrender and trust him.
Thank you so much for the call. We very, very much appreciate it. When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good is the new book from Gary Zimak. You can check out all of his books at his website, followingthetruth.com. That's also his podcast, followingthetruth.com. Gary, it does seem to me one of the... I'm going to ask you about this. Because you, this is your calling. This is your ministry. Is this ministry of liberating people by teaching trust in God, and I guess one of the things I think, it sounds like you must face constantly. Yeah, but what about this? It seems to me like a lot of the questions people ask. Yeah, but what about this? I mean, how can I have hope and trust in a world with this, or where I'm going through this, or with the. Is that a lot of the way that people talk about this and think about this with you?
It is, and that's actually what motivated me to write the book, and at the same time scared me, intimidated me about it. I was speaking one time in the Philadelphia area, and a woman at the end, we did a little question and answer session, and I mentioned the Romans 8:28 verse, God works, he can bring good out of all things. She said, well, what about when he doesn't? And she said, I'm not trying to be nasty, I'm not trying to be negative, but I prayed for my husband to be healed from cancer, and he died. A few months later, my son died. He wasn't healed from his illness. And she said, I'm just struggling to believe this. And so many people are struggling to believe it. When you turn on the news, you see these horrendous stories. We had one in the Philadelphia area recently where a young family was traveling to a barbecue. We had a flash flood. I think it made the national news. It was a father and three small children. A flood swept the car away. The mother died. The infant died in the flood. They still haven't found the infant's body. The 2-year-old died. They found his body. The father and the one son survived. How do you explain that? How do you explain a good God allowing that to happen? These stories challenge us all the time. But I believe we have to remember a couple things. We live in a fallen world. This is not heaven. And I apologize if anybody's listening and they're really struggling. I am not trying to trivialize this. And that's why I didn't want to write this book. But I needed to write it because I wanted to help people. It all comes down to choosing to trust in the Lord and knowing that he's not necessarily interested in making us comfortable in this life. He's interested in making us get to heaven. And while not trying to explain natural disasters where innocent people die, sometimes when we have an incident, a disaster, we really see the goodness in people who want to help. So he somehow brings good out of these situations. But yeah, every day there's something you just can't explain. And I think a lot of these things fall into that Job category. And so the reason I wrote the way I did was in response to that woman's question, who was just struggling to find the goodness of God. And, you just got to pray for people who are going through things like that. If you're going through it, just let the Lord know you're hurting and let him heal your heart. The Holy Spirit has an incredible ability to make us choose to believe even when it doesn't make any sense to believe. Does that make some kind of sense, Di?
It made beautiful sense to me, Gary. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And that's the thing, is this book grew out of real encounters that you've had with people over the years of this ministry that you do. We do have a bunch more folks on the line, so hang on the line. I'll do this last break real quick, and we'll get back to talk with Gary Zimak, the author of the new book, When Your Days Are Dark, God Is Still Good, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
He was a Jesuit, a cardinal, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Robert Bellarmine is honored for his immense contributions to theology, including helping to draft 2 important catechisms that defended church teachings during the Protestant Revolt. Pope Clement VIII named Bellarmine a cardinal because, as the Pope put it, Bellarmine had not his equal for learning.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Second hour, Jimmy's going to be here. We'll do a bonus open forum. So second hour, if you've got open forum question, which means any kind of question when Jimmy's here. And then hang on and we'll get to that. We've got Gary Zimak with us talking about his new book, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Good. I think I've mentioned everything. He'll come to your parish and do a parish mission. You can find out about that at followingthetruth.com. He's got a podcast. Oh, I didn't mention the email list. Thousands and thousands of people get this email. Gary writes every day to help you with these. I do. And these are encouragements and helping people to embrace the faith anew each day.
Yep, it's called Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. It's a Bible verse, a short reflection, and sometimes a prayer each day. Very similar to the format of Give Up Worry for Lent. I write them myself. I write them each day, usually based on the daily Mass readings. And this is really taken off. People love this. They love this connection. You know, my job is I'm just walking through life with anybody who's hurting. We're walking through together with the Lord, and I just want to help people. And the Lord has been so good to me. I want to try to help others. There is no cost for these emails. If anybody's interested, they just go to my website, followingthetruth.com. And really, all they have to do is supply their email address. And they hear from me once a day. I'm not going to spam anybody. I'm too busy to do that. But I got to stay connected to people who are hurting and like me, who are looking for some peace in life. That's my goal.
Gary Zimak, our guest, and Greg is back in Cleveland. We couldn't connect before. I'm not sure what happened, but in Cleveland, listening on AM 1260, The Rock. I just love to say that. I'm sorry. I love when people call from Cleveland. Hey, Greg, go ahead with your question for Gary.
How you doing, Gary? Both of you guys.
Hey, Greg.
Thank you for taking my call. Listen, I don't wish to debate you because you both are a lot smarter than me, but you know what you're saying doesn't apply to everybody. Okay, and I'm really, I've been listening to you, and I'm like somewhat envious of your relationship with God and Jesus. But it doesn't apply to everybody. Look, I've been in a situation which I'm not going to bore you with the details that I've been dealing with for 5 years, and countless Divine Mercy chaplets. I trust in you. I don't know how many thousands of times I said, but you know what? Sometimes it just doesn't happen. And I'm a little tired of faking it till I make it, okay? And it always work, guys. I'm telling you. It ain't working for me, and I'm at a pretty low ebb at this point. And I
Okay, Greg, hang on. I'm going to let Gary respond, and then we're going to come back to you because whatever that phone trouble we had before is back, and we're not hearing you. But I can identify with what Greg's saying. I wonder how you would respond to that.
You know, first of all, I am going to pray for Greg because obviously Greg's hurting. And I would encourage anybody listening to pray for Greg because I totally get it. I would expect people to question that because I'm that way sometimes. I go through what he's experiencing. Sometimes you just get fed up. Lord, I want this. I want that. Like, why? And this is something good I want. Why isn't this working out? What's wrong with you? And you know, if we read the book of Psalms, and I really don't want to trivialize or put down anything Greg's saying because I totally understand he's hurting. So many people are hurting. I would say if we look in the Psalms, we see oftentimes desperate cries of questioning the Lord. Lord, what are you doing? Where are you? And, you know, the old fake it till you make it, I've done that a lot. And I do that many times. Many times I don't feel anything. I just feel a situation is hopeless. I've had times and times in my life and with my ministry where I think this is never going to work out, you know, and I do, if you want to call it fake it till you make it, there are times I believe in God through my faith. I believe that God loves me. He's with me. He's bigger than my problems. And I believe that he will do anything he can to get me to heaven. Sometimes that involves suffering. Sometimes that involves allowing me to walk in the darkness. Sometimes it really hurts. Sometimes it involves getting me so angry that I just yell at him. But I would just encourage Greg, and again, I'm going to pray for your brother. I understand. It sounds like you mentioned the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Well, you're on board with the Lord, with God. You have a relationship with him. I would just try to encourage you to yell at him if you want. Take that discussion to him. Complain to him. Cry out to him. Get angry with him. But just don't stop talking to him. And that's what Job did. He just never stopped talking to the Lord. And brother, again, I'm going to pray for you, but I totally understand. That's why this book was so hard to write, Si, because I know somebody's going to look at this and say, oh, that's easy for you guys to say. And I don't ever want it to come across that way, because I do understand. I really do care. And I get why somebody would question this. And that's another reason I had to write this book, is because I am that guy. And I did question many, many times. But I found that God is faithful and that he really does love me, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Greg, I hope that was helpful to you. I wish we could come back to you, but whatever the original problem was, it's back and we are not able to. But God bless you, and be assured of many people praying for you, Greg. In the meantime, we'll go to Francis in Richmond, Virginia, listening on the EWTN app. Francis, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Gary Zimak.
Thank you. Gary, again, I'm Francis.
Hi, Francis.
And thank you for being. Hello, Gary. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
My wife and I have been married, for 40 years, and we have a son, age 39. Anyway, but my wife's Buddhist. She's from another country. I'm Catholic. And over the 40 years, we disagree on a number of hot-button issues, and it can make me really upset about things. And my poor wife, she doesn't understand. So I guess what I'm asking is, what should I do? Because what should I do?
Yeah, Francis, that's a great question. I'm really glad you called. I think the Holy Spirit is directing these calls today. Let me share something with you. My wife would not get mad if I said this, because we've talked about this before. My ministry has not been an easy road sometimes. We struggled financially. I mentioned earlier we had to sell our house. It was very, very tough. And, as we walk with the Lord, both my wife and I, in different ways, were struggling with this whole call that the Lord was calling me to do this. And my family's been supportive, but let me tell you, we have had our moments. And there was a time when my wife was very angry at God. And she told me, and she said, you know what? And you work for him, so I'm angry at you too. And you know what? My wife Eileen and I, we're best friends. We're in such a good place. We have weathered the storm, many times, and we are very, very close. But what happened was, I got to a point where it would get her angry if I told her I was praying about something or praying for her, because then she would say, well, yeah, but it's not working. And why isn't he fixing this or that? Again, something I went through at many times. So what I would say is that sometimes you got to pray for your family members, be kind to them, and just hold back, and don't, if it's going to, sometimes it's good to be prudent and not even let them know you're praying for them, because some people are going to get angry about that. So again, I'll pray for your situation, but let me tell you, the Lord has brought us through that. He's brought me through many situations. I have neighbors that I'm not going to talk to about God, but I pray for them. So you can always pray for somebody and be kind to them. And then when the time is right, when the Lord opens the door, then you can maybe say something a little more detailed.
Okay, Francis?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks very, very much. I tell you what, I'd like to send you Jimmy Akin's book, The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. I just think you'll enjoy the book. I like sending it to people who I think will enjoy it, and from the sound of your question, I think you will. Gary Zimak is our guest. Biblical advice to help you trust in difficult times. That's the subhead of his new book, When Your Days Are Dark, God is Still Good, which is a surprisingly controversial thing. I mean, it's easy to know it intellectually. It's hard to do anything else with it when you're in a dark place.
It really is. And sometimes, Si, you just have to rely on your faith. And there are a lot of days when I just don't feel it. And mostly little things, but there's been a few big things over the years that, yeah, intellectually it sounds good. Sure, God is good. He can do all things. He loves me until you get laid off like I did 11 years ago. But that led to my career in full-time ministry. So it was a tough thing to swallow at the time, but the Lord did bring good out of it. And I'll tell you what, the more you get to know him, specifically the more you get to know Jesus and you walk with him. That's why I'm such a believer in the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and confession. I go as often as I can. I go to daily mass. I go to confession frequently because I really need the grace. And through the sacraments, in addition to scripture and prayer, I've really gotten to know Jesus, and he walks with me during the day. I really feel him. He's with me.
Let's go to Juan in Iowa, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Juan, go ahead with your question for Gary Zimak. Okay, remember I said we had technical problems where I pushed the wrong button sometimes? That's what this one was. Hang on, Juan. Go ahead with your question.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Gary.
Hi,
my
Juan.
sister had a stroke and 3 aneurysms yesterday.
Oh.
And she's in the hospital. The doctors don't give her much hope. She's got swelling in the brain, and they got her connected to a ventilation machine, and basically, in so many words, says that it's just a matter of time. It's not what, it's when.
Mm-hmm.
So, wanting some guidance, the kids are wanting to disconnect her, and I prayed with them, and I shared the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 8, 5 through 11, where it talks about the centurion asking Jesus to heal his servant.
Mm-hmm.
And I just relate that because I felt God put it in my heart to say, look, he has faith, and he told Jesus, you don't have to come into my house. I'm not worthy to receive you into my house. But
Right.
medically, the doctors don't give my sister much hope. But for God, nothing is impossible.
Correct.
And I was talking with my wife, and I said, she said, if we disconnect her, then we're not giving God a chance to work in her life. So I'm just wanting some guidance.
Okay, Gary.
How we should proceed.
All right, and I'm going to Juan's going to take that off the air, I guess, because I don't think I disconnected him. He hung up, but so we'll give him that advice. But I do want to suggest to him that on the ethical side of that, if he's worrying about, he's on line 5. Okay, so he's still there. On the ethical side of that, we always refer people to the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they will help you with making the ethical decision. That's different than what you asked Gary about, but it's part of what you asked Gary about. So I want to say that before I lose you, and then I'll give Gary a few seconds. But National Catholic Bioethics Center, if you reach out to them, they will help you with these end-of-life decisions. Gary?
So I'm so glad you said that. That is absolutely good advice. But I want to give some personal testimony very quick to Juan. I have 25-year-old twin daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. They were given a 10% chance of being born alive, but they're 25, they're healthy. At the time, my wife had a very challenging pregnancy. And again, repeatedly, we were told they're not going to live. They're not going to make it. We had everybody in the world praying for them. And I ran into an old friend at an Adoration Chapel one day during the pregnancy. And he said, with God, all things are possible, but God's will be done. And there was something freeing about that. There were plenty of examples where the Lord can heal people, but ultimately we have to trust that he knows best and his will be done.
Praise God. Juan, thank you. Many people, I'm sure, are praying for both you and your sister and your family as you make these tough decisions. Gary Zimak, thanks. I always like it when you're here. It's weird to talk to you in the summer, but I enjoyed it.
It is. Let's do it again.
Well, all right. Let's do it again.
All right. Si, thank you so much. And I'm going to be praying for everyone who called in.
Thank you, Gary. When your days are dark, God is still good. You can get the book now wherever books are sold. You can get that book. Coming up, Jimmy Akin. Don't forget to check out Gary's website, too, followingthetruth.com. Check out the podcast, the email, all of that. Right back with Jimmy, an open forum, 888-318-7884. Hello and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and as promised, an hour of open forum this hour with Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We don't always do open forum on Friday, so if you're a Friday listener, it's your first time at it, open forum means anybody can call with any question at all. Those are the rules when Jimmy's here, basically. Please do not feel that it's exclusively for Catholics. Anybody who's got a question, if you got a question about of Christianity in any way, you got a question about God or philosophy or morals, and one other category, everything else. 888-318-7884 is the number. Your call very, very much wanted. 888-318-7884. And Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of a whole bunch of stuff, including a book called The Bible is a Catholic Book, and a book you hear us give away here all the time on Catholic Answers Live called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness, and Where to Find It. In addition to all that, he's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hello, Jimmy Akin.
Hello, Cy Kellett.
It's nice to see you again.
It is nice to see you again also.
I saw you briefly this morning where we had the failed attempt at pre-recording a show.
Hey, it wasn't my fault.
No, it was not. Oh, Darren says it was my fault.
Nah,
well,
it was a technical issue that got in our way.
You know, the file that got deleted, it didn't look like it was doing anything, so Darren deleted it. It just happened to be the file we needed to do the show. That's all. These things am I about summing that up about right? Yeah. Sorry about that, Darren. 888-318-7884 is the number if you've got a question. Oh, by the way, all Darren's kids were in here yesterday. His daughter Kate, it was her birthday. She was 6.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, and she wanted ice cream sandwiches made with cookies for her birthday. Did you guys get them? Did you do it? Nice. Good for you, Kate.
I didn't know they made ice cream sandwiches with cookies.
Well, they do in the Darren household.
Okay,
the
cool.
Delosiers do.
On the cutting edge.
Yeah, on the cutting edge of children's cuisine. Again, 888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. You can call and ask whatever you like today on Mysterious World. What dropped, Jimmy?
On Mysterious, well, you can ask anything you like on Catholic Answers Live.
Oh, yeah. I kind of jammed those together.
on Mysterious World, we interviewed a Dominican priest named Father Nathan Castle, who reports having a ministry to souls in purgatory. He has dreams of people dying in various situations that he interprets as cries for help. And so he and a prayer partner have a ministry where he and a number of prayer partners have a ministry where they enter into prayer and they seek to make contact with these souls and provide them with a kind of counseling to help free them from attachments that are holding them back in their journey to God. And this is something that is consistent with the way the Church articulates the doctrine of purgatory, which, if you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it indicates that the purpose of purgatory is to free us from disordered desires and unhealthy attachments to things in our life that would hold us back from being in full union with God. And so they provide a kind of counseling to try to help these souls move on and let go of these things and progress in their journey towards God. And so today he told us about his ministry to souls. And next Friday, we're going to go into analysis mode and talk about speaking with the dead and what's permitted, what's not permitted, what's kind of in the middle and maybe debatable. And we're going to analyze not just what Father Castle does, but the issue more broadly.
Check it out at mysterious.fm or just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World into your machine. Or just call right now and talk with Jimmy, 888-318-7884. We'll start with Anna in Atlanta, Georgia today, watching on YouTube. Anna, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. I have a question about Colossians 2:16 through 17. I was discussing with an SDA friend of mine, and she mentioned that the Sabbath mentioned on that verse that is said to be a shadow of things to come does not refer to the weekday Sabbath, but it refers to some festivals. I'm not sure exactly how to put it, but she said it doesn't indicate. This verse is not talking about not having to be obligated to keep the Saturday Sabbath.
Okay, so that's an interesting strategy, and I'm not surprised that she's denying that it's the weekly Sabbath, given that she's Seventh-day Adventist, because Seventh-day Adventists believe that we are supposed to keep the seventh-day Sabbath, which is Saturday. But what Paul says in this passage is that because the various Old Testament ceremonies were shadows pointing forward to Christ, and now that the substance which cast the shadows, Christ himself, has come, we're no longer bound to those Old Testament ceremonies. Not even Jewish people are, and Gentiles were never bound to them. And so he says, therefore, let no one judge you in food or drink, so you don't have to worry about keeping kosher. You can eat pork and things like that. And don't let anybody judge you in regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. And it is not plausible to interpret Paul's reference to a Sabbath as anything other than the weekly Sabbath in this context, because what Paul has just done, he's just named 5 categories of things. Food and drink were the first 2. And then the second 3 things he mentions, festivals, new moons, and Sabbath, were the 3 kinds of Jewish holy days. There were the annual festivals like Passover or Tabernacles. There were the monthly new moons, and then there were the weekly Sabbaths. And so in this context, now the normal meaning of the word Sabbath is Saturday, the 7th day of the week. It also could be used to refer to the entire week, but that doesn't apply in this case, because in the context, he refers to the festivals and the new moons, which were the other 2 kinds of Jewish liturgical celebrations, in addition to the weekly Sabbath. So since 2 of the 3 are the other 2 types of Jewish religious festivals or religious ceremonial times, the third, the Sabbath, must be a reference to the 3rd kind of Jewish ceremonial time, which was the weekly Sabbath or Saturday. So exegetically, or interpreting the text based on what it says, this just has to be the weekly Sabbath, and your Seventh-day Adventist friend, while she may be well-meaning, is mistaken when it comes to the correct interpretation of this passage.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can I ask one follow-up question?
Real quick.
One?
We're just getting near the break, so go quick.
Okay. Can you point me to any resource that I can read the Catholic view of this and also help her with other questions?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Like any books or like any resources, Catholic resources you can point me to.
Okay,
regarding
so
Sabbaths and all these.
Yeah, so one place that I would point you towards is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which has a discussion of this issue. Also, my book, The Fathers Know Best, has quotations from the early church fathers discussing early Christian views on this. We have a tract, I believe, at Catholic.com called Sabbath or Sunday that looks into this, although that may not be a separate tract than what's in The Fathers Know Best. But if you go to Catholic.com and type in Sabbath, a bunch of things will come up. Also, you can look at, if you want to go deeper, you can look at books on the Jewish calendar and how it works. A lot of those are kind of technical. You also could look at commentaries on Colossians that will have scholarly discussions of this passage. But those are some of the resources you might want to check out to follow up with.
And thank you very much for the call. That brings us to the break. We got to take that break. Be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and I share insights and stories from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest today. I'm going to go right back to the phones, but before I do, I got to just remind you, because the 31st is Monday.
So you're not going directly back to the phones, because you said I'm going to go directly back to the phones, but first, so it's like we're making an intermediate stop. We're not going directly there.
Yes, this is this is not the express bus. Yeah, so
Okay.
Maybe a slight misdirection there.
Slight detour.
Slight. Well, let me take. Yeah, right. And I'll try to make it slight, because the 31st is the last day of this month. Is coming up on Monday, and we promised that we would give a discount on two things until the 31st. And so I just want to make sure people know. If you want to come to the Catholic Answers Conference and you get your ticket before the 31st, you get $50 off. Just use the promo code EARLY when you go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. That conference is coming up in September 21st through the 24th, right here in sunny San Diego. CatholicAnswersConference.com. Use the promo code EARLY until Monday midnight Honolulu time. And if you're coming with us to Rome, there are still a few spots left, but the $300 off per ticket for the pilgrimage to Rome, November 9th through the 18th, will end also at midnight on Monday. Just go to CatholicAnswersPilgrimage.com. You don't need any promo code there. Anybody who signs up is getting $300 off right now. Whatever the list price is that you see there, $300 will come off of it. Go to CatholicAnswersPilgrimage.com. Now, I really am going straight to calls. And Luke got up on a Saturday morning in Seoul, South Korea, and he said, I'm going to call Catholic Answers Live. And Luke's an old friend of ours here. Hello again, Luke.
Hello. Hello, Sai. Hello, Jimmy. It's been a while.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So my question is, if Catholic priests are allowed to run for office, and the reason why I'm asking is because the Nigerian priest in the last election ran for governorship office and won the election, and I think he got suspended by the bishop or something.
Okay.
But after he won the election, I think the bishop accepted him back and agreed to work with him as the governor. So I don't know how this actually works. So I called to ask.
All right, Luke. All right. Can Catholic priests run for office?
Well, there's not a requirement of divine law that they can't run for office. God hasn't said anything directly about that. So historically, there have been Catholic clergymen who have been government officials, like, for example, Cardinal Wolsey in England. Just before the Protestant Reformation, he was a cardinal, so he was a priest, but he also was a high government official in England. Similarly, Cardinal Richelieu in France, if I'm not mistaken, also had a government post. So it's not a matter of divine law, and the practice of what's been allowed has changed over time, because even though there were Catholic priests who did have government posts in the past, it is not allowed under current canon law. This is something that was made clear during the reign of John Paul II. He revised the Code of Canon Law, and the new edition came out in 1983. And one of the provisions is that Catholic priests are not allowed to serve in government offices. The reason for that, presumably, is because there's a difference between the calling of the laity and the calling of the clergy. The clergy's role is to articulate the Christian faith, including its moral principles. The laity's role is to apply those principles to society. And so it's appropriate in a certain way for laity to have government office, but it can cause problems if a priest were to have a role in the government, because politics by its nature is political, and people divide up into teams when it comes to politics. They get in different political tribes. And if you have priests who go beyond just articulating the Christian faith, including its moral principles, if they're actually trying to apply those in concrete political situations, then you're very likely to have confusion and alienation on the part of the laity from the faith. Because, and there is an example I can cite here in the United States at the time, there was a member of our House of Representatives who was named Father, it's either Richard or Robert Drinan. And he was a Jesuit who, before the new code was released, had run for and won elective office as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And he was a Democrat. Okay, so how is the faithful supposed to look at that? You've got this clearly a priest who's a member of the Democratic Party and is advocating Democratic policies in the United States House of Representatives. Well, if you are a non-Democrat, if you are an independent or a member of the Republican Party, and you see this priest serving as a liberal Democrat, you might say, oh, well, this guy is not a member of my tribe. He is a member of a different tribe that's opposed to my tribe, and I don't like that. And I therefore don't want to be open to the Catholic faith because it's associated with my political enemies. And so because of concerns like that, John Paul II wanted to get the clergy out of politics so they could stick to their task. They could stay on mission, in other words, of preaching the Christian faith, including its moral principles, but not getting tangled up in political battles that could alienate people from Christ and his church. And so even though, and they tried to argue, well, Father Drinan still should be able to serve in the House of Representatives, and maybe he can be grandfathered or something like that. But Rome said no, he needs to resign. He can't, if he's going to be a priest, he can't be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He cannot hold political office in that way. And so Father Drinan, to his credit, ended up resigning. He didn't leave the priesthood. He stuck with his priesthood, and he stepped back from public office. Now, I'm not familiar. I think I may have heard of the situation that you mentioned in Nigeria, but I'm not familiar with the details of it, so I can't really comment on it directly. But at least up to now, there has been in the last few decades a strict prohibition on members of the Catholic clergy, or at least priests, and of course bishops and cardinals above them. But there has been a strict prohibition on priests holding political office under Catholic canon law. What's happening in the current situation and what the eventual outcome of it will be, I couldn't say.
Okay, Luke.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah.
All right.
Well, can I actually follow up? Is it okay?
Can you? Oh, you want to follow up? Yeah. Again, real quick, if you could, Luke.
I don't. Okay. Okay. A few years ago, my dad was shot on his way to church, and he died.
Oh no.
And he died on my mom's arm, and he was just your age, right? Yeah. So I just wanted to know, I've been struggling with that for a long time, if that was the will of God for such thing to happen.
Oh, Luke, first of all, I'm so sorry on the loss of your father. I'm very, very sorry.
especially in the tragic, dramatic way that you describe. It must have been very traumatic, not only for you, but for your mother and other members of your family. And I encourage the listeners to pray for your father and for all victims of violence and those who survive them. In terms of the will of God, there are different opinions. According to one opinion, God is the author of life. He gives us life as a gift, and it's up to him to determine the circumstances of how much of that gift we receive. And he also determines the circumstances under which we leave this life, which, of course, is only a prelude to life eternal. So there's still an infinity of life ahead of us. And even though we may suffer very, very dramatic and bad things in this life, God will more than make it up to all of us. St. Paul talks about how, there's an enormous weight of glory in store for us in the next life that exceeds whatever we've suffered in this life. So there's hope in that. Now, that's one opinion. There is another opinion, though, that would say that God does not actively choose exactly how long a person lives or the exact circumstances of their death, that instead humans have free will. And so a person can, by the choices they make, affect how long they're going to live, and the choices other people make can affect how long that person's lives. So if someone misused their free will and shot your father on the way to church, that wouldn't be God's decision, that God chose to have this happen. Instead, God would, on this view, merely tolerate that this happened. And we know, as the Catechism explains, God only tolerates an evil if he's going to bring about a greater good. So God would not have even allowed your father to experience this if he wasn't going to bring about something even better as a result. We may not know in this life what that better thing is, but just like parents will tolerate their children having the pain of being vaccinated against diseases, they tolerate that because the vaccine is going to bring about a greater good. The child is never going to get smallpox, for example, or other horrible diseases, even though it means going through a temporary amount of pain in order to get to that good goal. And so on this view, God didn't choose to have your father die in this way or in these circumstances. He merely tolerated it in the knowledge that he will ultimately bring about a greater good for your father and for your family and for everybody by tolerating this evil. But the person who's responsible for this is whoever used their free will to choose to shoot your father. That's the person that's responsible for this, not God. And it was a genuine evil what they did. They murdered an innocent person, and God will hold them accountable for using their free will in that evil way. He also will work with the situation to bring about a greater good, just like he tolerated the death of his son on the cross in order to bring about the salvation of the world. So even in the case of his own son, God was willing to tolerate an evil to bring about ultimate good. It's very painful when we experience evil, and it's understandable, the pain that you and the rest of your family have gone through in the wake of this experience. I had not previously known about this, but God is with you in the suffering, and he will more than make it up to your father and to you and your family in days to come, either in this life or in the next life or both. So be of heart in that God will bring about a greater good, and he would not have tolerated this unless he was going to bring about that greater good.
Luke, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for the call. I know that you're Nigerian living in South Korea. Was your father in Nigeria or Korea when this happened?
Yeah, he was in Nigeria. It was just on a fateful Sunday morning. He just came out with my mom to go to church, and then this unknown gunmen came out and shot him, and before they got to the hospital, he died on my mom's arm, so because of loss of blood. So yeah, it happened in Nigeria, unfortunately.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Luke. It's always such a pleasure for us. We don't get a lot of calls from Seoul, South Korea, so it's always been a pleasure when you call, and I hope you'll keep calling.
And I want to reiterate, inviting the listeners to pray for Luke and his family and the repose of his father's soul.
The number here is 888-318-7884. We'd love it if you call. There'll be, just one line open right now, but you're welcome to fill it up. Jimmy Akin's here. It's open forum. We'll continue with that right up to this on Catholic Answers Live. Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God, and it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it is a little bit of bonus open forum for a summer Friday afternoon. I am going to go next to Caitlin in Pennsylvania, who's listening on the EWTN app. Caitlin, you've been very patient. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Oh, you're welcome. I just love the app and I love the show.
Thank you.
My question is, I heard that the Antichrist is going to reign on the earth for 3 years until Mary has her triumphs. Are we in the time where he's reigning now before Mary has her triumph?
Well, I don't see any evidence for that. Now, there's a certain sense in which antichrists have always been with us. That's something that John talks about in his first epistle. He says that to his readers, you've heard that the Antichrist is coming, and indeed, many Antichrists have gone out into the world. So there have already been Antichrists down throughout history. But if we're talking about a single Antichrist who is the climactic villain of world history, I don't see any evidence that we're living in his reign. That would mean he is a living individual, and that he's currently reigning, so he's currently in a powerful political office. And I don't see anybody that fits the biblical description of the Antichrist. Now, one of the things that John tells us about him is that the spirit of the Antichrist and the Antichrist himself denies the incarnation of Christ. So, he denies that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. And so that's part of what the Antichrist does. He is also commonly identified with figures like St. Paul talks about as the man of sin and the beast of the book of Revelation. Now, in its literal fulfillment, the beast of the book of Revelation appears to be the line of Roman emperors in the 1st century and is associated in a particular way with the Emperor Nero. That's, in fact, what the number 666 seems to refer to, because if you add up Nero Caesar in Hebrew or Aramaic, it adds up to 666. If you spell it a little differently, it adds, because you can spell it more than one way, but if you spell it a little differently, it'll add up to 616. And there are, in fact, a few early manuscripts of Revelation that give the number 616, even though most of them give 666. And that suggests that there were early Christians who recognized that Nero Caesar is associated with the Antichrist in a particular way, and that's why we find both numbers in early manuscripts, both 616 and 666. Also, from the way that the book of Revelation describes the beast, it indicates that the beast rules the world, which means the Roman world, and it demands worship as a god, and it persecutes the church and its apostles to death. Okay, well, the apostles are gone from the scene, so the beast is not today going to be literally fulfilled because the line of 1st century Roman emperors no longer exists. So that seems to be the literal fulfillment of the beast, but it's commonly thought, and I think with some good reason, that there will be a spiritual echo, a later fulfillment of the model of the beast at the end of the world before the second coming. And that's who is typically referred to as the Antichrist. But I don't see anybody who fits on the world scene today who fits the model of the Antichrist. There isn't a world leader that rules either the world or the whole Roman Empire. This non-existent leader does not deny that Jesus came in the flesh, and this non-existent leader does not have the number 666, and when you add up his name, and he's not persecuting the church or its leaders to death. So if the final Antichrist is like the beast, there's nobody like that on the world scene today. And so it seems to me that we do not have good evidence that we are living in the reign of the final Antichrist. There are certainly Antichrist, figures that oppose the church today, but they're on the same order as the Antichrist figures we've had with us all the way down through history. None of them are the final climactic Antichrist. And so I would say be at peace about this. We just don't have evidence that we're living in that time yet.
Caitlin, as much as I love talking about the Antichrist, I'm going to have to leave that there because lines are full. Go ahead.
By the way, one other thing. The idea, and I am aware of some people like Countdown to the Kingdom who have this idea that first the Antichrist is going to reign, and then there's going to be this age of Christian triumph over the world. That is extremely hard, but not yet the second coming. That is extremely hard to square with what the church actually teaches. Because if you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, this is essentially a version of what's called millenarianism. Or in Protestant circles, it's called premillennialism. It's also called chiliasm. And it's the idea that there will be this long period of triumph prior to the end of the world. And that is not the understanding of the church. If you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and it's around paragraph 676, it's only 10 paragraphs away from 666. I do not know why they didn't just change the numbering.
What an opportunity.
But I know, it's such a great opportunity. But if you look there, it says that the church has ruled that even even mitigated systems of millenarianism have been rejected by the church. And if you dig into the to where the church has talked about this previously, the Holy Office, now the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, had ruled that the systems of these sort cannot be safely taught. That was the actual original ruling. They cannot be safely taught. And instead, what the Catechism says is that the Antichrist is going to persecute the church, and the church will almost become extinct, but then Christ will return and save his church. Not that Mary is going to have a big triumph that's going to last for a lengthy period before the second coming. It's going to be the second coming that ends the reign of the Antichrist. And so the theories that you have encountered, Caitlin, are not only not supported by evidence on the current world scene, they actually appear to be in conflict with the teaching of the church.
Again, Caitlin, thank you very, very much for the question. I'm going to Brian in New York, who's listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Brian, go ahead with your question.
Hi, I'm Brian, 54 years old, father of three, two girls and a boy. My oldest is just made me a grandpa.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah. So basically, I'm calling to spare you the details. I have symptoms basically of multiple swollen glands, and has led me to an oncology appointment on Tuesday. And basically, my fears are at the worst.
Okay.
That the diagnosis is going to be
cancer.
The worst case scenario.
Okay. So how can we help you, Brian?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just like I feel like that I'm going to be if this becomes incurable, or if it's I just feel like the anxiety level is that I'm just going to be left behind, and my kids are going to go on and have kids, and I'm not going to be there. But,
okay.
My son is he's serving in Italy in the military. I have a beautiful 16-year-old girl, and my 23-year-old girl is married with my granddaughter.
Brian,
and
but this is all the anxiety seems overwhelming, but we don't have a diagnosis yet.
No, I understand that, but it's just like the fact that I was led to an oncology appointment due to my symptoms. I get that.
Okay.
It's not an official diagnosis yet, but.
Did you want to ask Jimmy something about it?
Well, I don't really have. It's basically the anxiety level. That.
Okay.
I also feel like, of course, like everybody else, when they go down these roads, they feel, is it something I did? Is it something that the Lord is unhappy with me? And it's something that,
Okay. Well, let's get an answer to that, Brian.
Yeah, because we're getting near break time, so I want to give you the best answer I can. The first thing I want to do is encourage the listeners to pray for Brian and for everyone who's in similar situations, because there are a lot of people who face this. Brian, as you know, death is something that comes for everyone, and we all will experience it, assuming Jesus doesn't come back first. We're all going to experience death. And we're all going to have people we leave behind and things that we're not going to be able to complete in this life. I understand how frightening it is, and it's understandable that you're frightened by this. God built humans to be averse to death, to have death aversion. Even Jesus had death aversion. If you look at what happened to him in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's clearly experiencing anxiety and fear about his coming death. So this is a very human thing. It is very natural. It's something that God, these feelings are something that God built into us. And it's part of what helps us survive. It helps keep us alive. The fact that we are averse to death, that we're afraid of it happening to us, is something that motivates us to stay out of situations that are dangerous. So these feelings actually can play a positive role in life. At the same time, we need to not be controlled by our fears. It's understandable that we have anxieties, and it's understandable that we check them out, and that's good. You said you have glands that are swollen, and so you're checking them out. But as Cy pointed out, you don't have a diagnosis yet. And that brings to mind something that actually happened to me. My wife died 31 years ago. She died at the age of 28, which is much younger than you and I are now. And she had, or it actually may have been 27 now that I think about it, but she died of cancer. And within a year, I had a very traumatic experience of moving out to California to start work for Catholic Answers. And I was still grieving my wife, and I had witnessed what happened to her with cancer. And I was feeling around on my body, and it's like, I've got this lymph node. I've got these lymph nodes. They seem kind of big. And so I was feeling my lymph nodes. They seemed to be swollen. I was wondered that I might have lymphatic cancer, and so, or cancer that had spread to my lymph nodes. So I had it checked out too. And I went in, I had surgery, I had a biopsy on the lymph nodes. And the good news was that it came back and it's like, no, you just got big lymph nodes. They're not cancerous. And the same thing could happen to you. So I would mention that as something to think about as a way of helping control your anxiety and moderate it during this time. It's not like the anxiety is going to go away completely, but that realization, that's a practical realization that even when you have swollen glands, it doesn't automatically mean you have cancer. Then there's something else, which also dates from the time that my wife died. I was talking to her while my wife was still undergoing chemotherapy. I was talking to her oncologist, and I was watching what was happening to my wife and how much she was dealing with. And I said to the oncologist, how can you do this work? You know, because I was imagining every case is like my wife's, and if I was an oncologist, I don't know how I would get through the day. And he said, your wife's case is not typical. She had a rare, aggressive form of cancer that he thought she only had for a few months. And he said, this is not what happens with most of my patients. Most of my patients that do have cancer, they come in, they get their treatments, and they're okay. They aren't in danger of imminently dying. They're able to go on and have quality of life. And what's happening to your wife is unusual. It is not typical of a cancer patient. And so even if you did end up getting a diagnosis of cancer, it wouldn't mean imminent death. It wouldn't mean imminent illness. The cancer might very well be treatable or even curable. That's the case for a huge number of people. There also are cancers that some people have that don't actually kill you. You've got some cells that are growing abnormally, but you're not going to die from the cancer. You may die with the cancer, but it's going to be something else that is ultimately what is going to happen. The cancer itself will not kill you. And so it's understandable that you be concerned about this, but don't focus on the worst case scenario. And that brings us to a couple of spiritual points. One of them I haven't yet mentioned in today's episode, but ask yourself the question, is focusing on my current anxieties going to help? Will it help me to focus on my current anxieties, or will it help me more to set them aside, or at least try to set them aside and think about something else, something more constructive, something pleasant, like spending time with my family, however much I have left, whether it's a short time or a long time, being with my family and enjoying them and enjoying my granddaughter. All of those are good things to do. And what's going to help me more is it going to help me more to worry about this right now, or is it going to help me and my family more to do something else right now and do my best to try to set these aside, these anxieties? My suspicion is it's going to be the latter, because you've already done what you can do for now, which is make an appointment to get this checked out. You've already taken the practical step. And so further worrying about it, I don't see how that's really going to help you. Now, of course, you can do things like praying about it, but even then, I would recommend that you not let the worries consume you, because that will not help. God is not punishing you. It's not going to help you to worry about, have I done something that offended God? I already talked about, earlier in this same episode about the principles that are involved in God tolerating evil. And even if it's true that you end up with a cancer diagnosis, that's something God's tolerating. He's not causing you to have this. And so don't punish yourself, because God is not punishing you. If you think, well, I'm a sinner and I've done something sinful, well, that's true of all of us. But that doesn't mean God is giving you cancer as a punishment. If you have sins that you haven't yet confessed, well, go to confession. But don't punish yourself into thinking you've brought this about. It's something God is tolerating, but it's not something that God is causing. And that's related to the spiritual principle that Jesus articulates in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, don't worry. Every day, don't worry about tomorrow. Every day has enough trouble on its own. Take things one day at a time. So instead of worrying about, am I going to be in a worst case scenario situation, do your best to set those worries aside and live in today, and do the positive things that you can do today, rather than just worrying about and obsessing about what's going to happen in the future. Because you can't, as Jesus says, you can't make one hair of your head white or black. There are some things that are just beyond our power. So don't worry about the things that are beyond your power. You've already taken the practical step that you can. You've made the appointment. Go through with the appointment and see what happens. You may have a wonderful diagnosis if there's nothing wrong with at all. You just got big glands, or it's something else. It is cancer, but it's treatable, or even curable. So don't worry about those eventualities. Just focus on doing what you can right now that will be a benefit to you and to others. The second principle I mentioned, because we are all eventually going to die. Something's going to get us. And whatever that is, it means our lives are finite and they are of different lengths. None of us, as Gandalf says, is promised a time. But that's part of our existence, but it's not the end of our existence. As I was discussing with Luke earlier in this episode, as St. Paul points out, we've got eternity waiting for us. Death is just a transition. But after this life, however long it is or however it ends, we get to be with God. In fact, St. Paul says he's looking forward to that. He says it's better to be with God than to live in the current fallen world. And it may be God's will that I live here for now, but he's looking forward to departing and being with Christ. And it's not just Christ that we're going to be with, because we're not going to be separated from our families. We're going to meet them again in the afterlife, and we're going to have eternity to spend together in joy and in love. And that includes members of our family we didn't get to meet. So let's say over the next 1,000 years, you've got 500 descendants or 2,000 descendants. You're going to have eternity to get to meet and know them all and celebrate the lives that they had because of you. because you were their ancestor that allowed them to come into this world. So there is, as St. Paul says, a weight of glory ahead of us, and it far exceeds anything we suffer in this life, including whatever our final illness happens to be. So I would encourage you to not cross your bridges before you come to them. Don't worry to the extent you can. Don't worry about a diagnosis you don't have yet and that may not be as bad as what you're fearing. Don't focus just on the worst case scenarios, but trust God, take things one day at a time, and realize that even if death comes sooner rather than later, it's something that is not the end. And there is something even better for you and your family in the future.
Brian, thank you so much for the call. I do hope that was helpful. I hope many people are indeed praying for you. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with more Open Forum.
Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Ryan's on the line in Nebraska, watching on YouTube. Ryan, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Can you hear me good?
Can I read your question?
No, I mean, hear me good.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you, yes. I'm sorry. I guess I didn't hear you that well, but now I can. All right, go ahead with the question.
Okay, yeah.
We're really close to the end, though. So,
I'm currently in RCIA, and before then I was watching these State of Contest videos. I'm sure you know Most Holy Family Monastery, and they were saying, like, before Vatican II, they're allowed to attend gatherings of non-Catholics. And he was saying, like, they're saying, like, John.
All right. It's Ryan, I'm going to have to read your question because it's coming in and out. And so I get the context is what people say
State
about
of a contest.
State of a contest saying before the Second Vatican Council, we weren't allowed to gather with non-Catholics. Now we are gathering with non-Catholics. So what's the church's teaching on attending non-Catholic gatherings and religious services, Jimmy?
Okay, so first of all, one of the characteristics of groups like Most Holy Family Monastery and other Seat of a Contests is they don't really understand what heresy is. Heresy is the culpable rejection or refusal to believe of a dogma, which is something that the Catholic Church has infallibly defined to be divinely revealed. And they often use a kind of straw man argument where they find something they disagree with and say, oh, this must be a heresy. Well, okay, so here the proposition presumably would be that, at least the extreme form of the argument would be that it's a heresy to say that there are circumstances in which one can attend non-Catholic religious services, except the Church has never infallibly defined that that's divinely revealed. And in fact, that's not even consistent with Catholic tradition. If you go back and you read older moral and pastoral theologies from before Vatican II, they're going to say things like, well, we shouldn't take Protestant sacraments because they're not valid and so forth, but they'll acknowledge that there are situations in which it's legitimate for a Catholic to go to them. For example, if you're a Catholic servant of a Protestant master and they require you to go to their services, you can go as long as you also fulfill your Catholic obligations. And essentially, that's the Catholic position today. As long as you fulfill your Catholic obligations, you can go to Protestant services. You need to protect your faith as you do that, but it is not in principle illegitimate. There's more than I could say about that, but I'm afraid we're at the end of the episode, so I'll have to leave it there.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate the bonus hour with you this week. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And that'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.